Valley for inviting me to do this, and also for continually inviting me back to teach. I love to teach here. It's absolutely a wonderful experience, and I look forward to it every year. So hopefully I can keep being invited back. But I guess I need to say a few words or something about all these boxes that I made, which is probably a little crazy to try to do something like this. I don't think I really understood exactly what I was getting myself into when I started it, but thankfully my mom and dad raised someone who was tenacious, and so I didn't give up. There's a couple of different stories or ways to tell why I did this. The funny one is that I did this because at work I got teased a lot for making boxes. And my former boss would always, I'd make a box and he'd say, oh, that's where you put your pot. And and I got kind of tired of hearing that, and I was like, well, I like to make boxes, so I'm going to make a bunch of boxes. And I thought, a nice way to do that would be to set some type of goal for myself. And from there, I started to think more about what I wanted to accomplish. And so it sort of transformed into an attempt to improve my design skills, to try to grow my aesthetic into something that was mature and fully resolved. And also, as one of the things I know from things I've done in my past, like sports and philosophy and so forth, that in order to get good at something, you have to do it a lot. And so I wanted to make a lot of boxes, and figuring I would get good at making boxes if I did that. So I don't know how successful any of that was, except that I did make 52 boxes. I did succeed there. The rest of it is, is up to debate, I suppose. So that's why I did this. And along the way, I'm happy with where I ended up, because I do think I have the last box, which is this T box, which was 51. There's actually one after it, but this T box I think got me to a fairly well-developed aesthetic, where I have a clear idea of what I'm doing when I design, and also it will be a good launching point to do things like make full-size furniture. So I'm happy with the way things progressed, and along the way I got to experiment with a lot of different techniques for making furniture and for making boxes. And I made a lot of things that I never would have thought I would make. And I made a lot of things that I initially didn't like, but I ended up appreciating quite a bit. Like the apple box, which is one which a lot of people like, but initially I really did not like, but now I see what other people see in it. So I learned a lot along the way. I picked up new skills, and I did develop a more resolved aesthetic. And other than that, I had a lot of fun, I guess. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I could probably talk forever about this, but I probably shouldn't. But I'm happy to be here, and I'm thankful that someone's given me the opportunity to show all of them at once. It has changed my perspective on them greatly, because when I was making them, I saw them one at a time, and I was watching the sausage get made. And when you watch the sausage get made, the sausage doesn't taste as good. So now that I see them, honestly, they've just been sitting in a cubicle at work. Most of them have, and some of them have been packed away. And now that I get to see them fresh again, and also being presented fantastically by Brienne, just even from Thursday when I delivered them till today, it's really changed my perspective on them, and it makes me appreciate them more. So I think I will, for the next hour and a half or however long we're here, I will be also looking at them alongside the rest of you, and maybe I'll have questions for y'all that y'all can explain to me. So anyways, that's it. Thanks, and I'll answer any questions that you have. Yes?
Did you have 52 designs when you started, or were you making them up as you went along?
I was definitely making them up as I went along, for sure. Yeah. The first two that I started with are over on this shelving unit. One of them is walnut with a yellow lid, and the other one's cherry with a blue lid. And that very simple design with a very simple pull, it's sort of where I was coming from. I've been using milk paint a little bit, so the milk painted lid was new, but the basic shape and everything was where I was. I sort of was looking at proportions a little more there, trying to develop that aspect of my design. So that's where I started, and as I went along, I was definitely coming up with new designs and experimenting with different things that I was interested in. For example, I've liked bento boxes, and so I often would try to make boxes that had multiple compartments in them. And as I went along, that idea got expressed in different ways. There's, for example, this box which has lots of little compartments. Then there's also the wall on the bottom, the box on the wall there, where I separated out those compartments and used them as a means to display a sake set that has sentimental value to me. But then it also further got articulated in this box in the cabinet there, where not only do you have multiple drawers sort of arranged in a bento type fashion, but also instead of having a single case piece, I broke the case piece up into individual compartments. So even that idea of, which I always sort of monkeyed around with, was getting further developed, and I was exploring with it more. And just the idea of breaking a case piece apart did lead to the kindling box, where I broke the base apart from the box part itself, and then that led next to the first big tea box that I made. And then that tea box, just the idea of breaking the case apart from the base, led to box 51, where there's a plinth, which is decorative and attractive in itself, and separated from two boxes that sit on top of each other. So although I was designing things as I went along, there were themes that were there at the beginning that were getting evolved as I went along. So, and I was actually I was aware of. That's not something I just realized, but there are other things I'm just realizing now, like, oh, I was doing that. I had no idea, But that one I did. That one I thought about a lot consciously. So.
I have another question.
Sure.
These three boxes here, the ends are actually flat, right?
No, all the sides slope in about. They are flat, but they angle in about 10 degrees.
You're aware of the optical illusion from the curved lid and the relief bottom that makes it look curved in?
I was not aware of that. No. I'll have to look at that.
It was curved. It was curved. It was curved. And the closer I looked, no, it wasn't. So I was just wondering if you were aware of it.
I wasn't, and I'll look at it, because I never noticed that before, but I'll go look.
Yeah. The relief at the bottom makes the side itself
Look curved. How about that? Yeah. No. Those were an experiment in making a box that angles in like that with a compound miter can be difficult, but and with the help of a colleague at work, we developed a technique using wedges that totally eliminates any math and any complications, and it makes it very simple to do all the different joinery that has to be done. So
that's funny because I'm the exact opposite. I would do all the math.
yeah.
Right into vectors we go.
Yeah, math, that's where you make errors. So I always try to find a way to do it where, the blade only had to be tilted to 45 and the piece was sent through the blade 90 degrees to it. But this way the wedge held it, you get a compound miter out of the cut. So it's a way to try to simplify the building process and to ensure consistent results. So now that I have the wedge and the various other jigs I use to make it, I can go back and reproduce that box whenever I want to without having to think about how I did it or do the math again. So.
It'd be interesting to see a large table or bench box
Made that way.
made that way.
Yeah, that's
Just to take it and blow it up.
Yeah, some of these forms would translate pretty well into larger forms. You know, I always think of this one that it would be a cool coffee table.
Mm-hmm.
You know, make it a lot bigger. Although it might be kind of hard to push that drawer open both ways. But yeah, some of them would translate, and that would translate, I think, well into like a blanket chest with a hinge lid. Or a coffin. Yeah, some of them have a sort of a coffin feel to them. Like this one here looks kind of like a coffin. You could put a little fat hamster in that one. Yeah. And I guess these even too also have sort of a coffin shape to them. Yes?
They're painted so perfectly, or stained. I'm not a woodworker. Did you paint them after, or did some of them you painted the pieces and put them together?
Yeah, so it's all milk paint is the particular type of paint that I use. And for the most part, so like a lid like this, which has painted edges, what I'll do is fit the lid to the opening, but the top and bottom, it would be thicker than the final dimension. And then I'll tape it off and pull the tape off, and then hand plane the surface and get it down to its final dimension. And that clears up any problems you would have with paint seeping back in. And for the most part, like on those boxes that are right in front of you, that's how I did that.
Because the edges are painted perfectly too.
Inside the little rabbit underneath it.
It's like so, yeah.
Yeah. So that's just a matter of good, masking it off. With woodworking, and I'm sure this is probably the case with other crafts as well, you always want to try to eliminate the potential for error. And so, good craftsmanship is as much about knowing how to eliminate error as it is sort of, being some type of savant with tools that doesn't make error. It's about understanding how to eliminate the possibility for error. And that's what the taping, the masking off does. And so that's usually what I do, is it's a combination of masking off and then doing surface preparation after the painting's done. So.
I have another question.
Sure.
What about your fabric choice? How did you pick your fabrics?
So I love going to the fabric store. And fabrics, one, it's a matter of finding a color that's complementary to the wood that's being used. I don't know how to explain that, what I do there, because I just kind of go, yeah, that looks nice to me. The more important thing is all the fabrics that I use have patterns on them. So, this has a little flower pattern. This box over here has a flower pattern as well. And there, it's a matter of ensuring that the pattern that you pick, the proportions of it, match the proportions of the piece that's where it's going to be. So I pick out since I make a lot of small things, I pick fabrics that have small patterns on them. Or on these two tea boxes, which that lattice work is called kumiko. There, I could do a pattern behind that, but from my perspective, that works better with it being something of a solid color. So I picked a fabric that's solid, and yet, but it looks like it was woven. So there's some, it's almost like it was rice paper, which, if it were, rice paper would be a traditional thing to go behind kumiko, say in a shoji door. So on the one hand, it's sort of modern in that it's a basic color, but it also calls back to the traditional material that would be in a Japanese shoji door, which is where kumiko shows up a lot. So, here it's a matter of understanding that a pattern on the fabric would interfere with the sort of the geometric shapes being created by the kumiko. Can you open that? Yeah. So the interior is painted white, So I have a tea set that goes in here, so it's white so that the tea set, when you open it, it sort of stands out. You know, whereas if it, and also it makes it brighter inside, you know. So if I had left it just natural cherry, it would be darker and you wouldn't see the tea set as well. So, yeah, so I could have didn't do Kumiko on the back there, but so for me, choosing fabric is about color, and then it's about making sure that the pattern is something in terms of its proportion matches the proportion of the box being made. The use of color was something I started to do many years ago. There's something about opening up a box and having that color there to sort of be a nice little surprise. And I just like fabrics, you know, like that. I like that it's, because there's texture in fabric and there's warmth in fabric. And it's also something that I knew no other woodworker was doing. You know, woodworkers, it's just not something they would do is use fabric, and especially not in the ways that I use it. So that was appealing to me, but I've always liked to incorporate color, and I initially did it with fabric, you know, as a way to soften and warm up the interior of a box. So.
Now, do you wrap the fabric around a separate piece of wood that you then put in?
So when I first started using fabric, which was at least, it was probably 10 years ago or something, I would buy like a 1/2-inch thick foam and wrap it around that, and then that would fit down in it. That works really well, but it's not as clean as I would like. So I started, a couple of things happened that changed the way that I could use fabric. And one of them, it was how I put the bottom into the box. So now all my bottoms fit into the same type of recess here. This is called a rabbet. So all my bottoms fit into a rabbet after the box is assembled. So what that allows me to do is to glue the fabric down to, usually my bottoms are plywood with a shop sawn veneer on the outside. And then I can glue the fabric down, and it fits up inside the rabbet, and that gives you a really clean edge. And also the fabric is flat and taut.
I noticed it was sharp.
Yeah, so that technique is much more in keeping with my overall aesthetic of, you know, clean, simple lines. And so that is actually something that came about during the 52 boxes. You know, I figured that out, and that's how I could do it. So the earliest boxes that I made, like 1 and 2 and so forth, they don't have anything on the inside. And I then got into doing milk paint sort of on the interior. And here, this is a bottom that fits into a rabbet. And from there, I thought, well, if I can do that, I can just do fabric. So why not do fabric? And so now I do both a mix of fabric and still sometimes milk paint as well. So I actually made this box, or at least part of it, here at Peters Valley. Yeah, during there was a Lee Nielsen open house, and I was working on that box. And this box is not the original, because the original sold at the Monday afternoon auction, but that box I made at Peters Valley while I was teaching. Yeah.
It's amazing to see how you went from, you know, one little box to something that complex. You didn't complete them in 1 week, the more complex ones.
No, well, like the killing box I did make in a week. That's actually not very complicated. But the 2 tea boxes did take longer, and I would work on other boxes at the same time. So, yeah, those are definitely larger undertakings and probably push the common definition of box a little bit. But that's okay, right? I mean, I said all along that I was going to decide what a box is. And so So the apple counts as a box. You know, you can put something inside it and store it. But yeah, those definitely took longer. I never intended to make literally one box a week because I knew that that just wasn't going to be possible.
Right.
So it was, you know, figuring out, okay, if I'm making this over the course of 4 weeks, what else am I going to be working on so that I don't fall behind? So that's what I did. But most of them actually were made in a week. You know, I think even the Madrone box with the white oak drawer, white pine drawer fronts, I believe that was made in a week. It might have been 2 weeks, but it was definitely less than 14 days. So.
And the finishes, do you oil them, or is this just straight wood with that's been plain?
All of these are, besides the milk paint, is shellac.
Wow, it looks like it's perfectly natural.
Yeah, I use a really thin coat of shellac, and a thin cut, they call it cut of shellac. So it's very, there's more, it's like equal parts shellac and denatured alcohol. And so it's a very light coat, and it dries fast, and it doesn't obscure the wood much. So.
And how many coats do you?
It depends, but a lot of them just have 2 coats. But you know, like this tea box, I know has more than that. I wanted a little more luster and protection, so I built up the shellac a little bit more. But most of them just have 2. The only thing that doesn't have a finish on it is the kindling box, and I believe it has nothing at all because it's just next to my wood stove, and there was no sense in putting a finish on it because it gets so hot there that you might damage shellac or I don't think there's anything on that at all. There might be oil, I don't remember. But. Is that more